Hello everybody! So today we are going to be doing a tutorial on Fluffle, fluffle.cc. I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this layout that I came up with, as well as going over some of the basics and just the format of how this site works so that you can hopefully, with the knowledge gained, go on to create your own site if you don't necessarily like how this one looks. A few quick notes before we begin. This was a video request given to me, but I know Fluffle, I believe it's newer, and I know it's pretty similar to Rentry. If you guys are familiar with that, I am not super familiar with those type of sites. This is my first time experimenting with them. But I know one of the things that Fluffle, I'm pretty sure, does differently than Rentry is you are able to make an account, which I would recommend doing because then all of your sites are in one place and you have, instead of having to enter in an edit code every single time you need to edit your site, you can just log into your account and change the site that way. So once you have created your account, made a password, logged in, that type of stuff, you will be faced with something that looks pretty similar to this. So edit, which is where most of the content will go. Preview, so you can see how it looks. I just have high right now because I needed to have something to be able to publish it, as well as metadata, which is one of the first things that we will get into. And you will need to create a URL for the site. So this can be anything as long as it is not already in use by someone. And I believe also this is something that is a little bit different from Rentry. You are able to use HTML and CSS, which I did for most of the site. And I know it looks pretty complicated, or it looks like a lot at least, but it is not complicated, and we will go through it together and I'll explain what each thing does. We'll start with metadata, which I am pretty unfamiliar with this, so I would suggest reading through this because it will explain it a lot better than I ever could. So I did use a little bit of metadata, but then I ended up doing most of it in CSS and HTML as that is what I am familiar with. So if you click on this button here, which this site, as well as pretty much, well, not even pretty much, every resource that I use in this tutorial will either be linked in the Google Doc, which is in the video description, or the sites will be directly in the description of this video. Also, I don't know why it's telling me that this is AI because it's like, it's not, but anyways, this is the bulk of the metadata that I have used, and going back to this site, super helpful. This was a big reference for me when I was learning my way around metadata. Again, I'm no expert at all. It is still very new to me, but it has all of the, I guess they're called fields, and how they work and what they do that you can add to your site. So I would recommend referring back to this if you ever are lost at any point. So in the Google Doc, I have the metadata that I used, which we can just go ahead and copy and paste into our site, and I'll explain what all of it does as we edit it together. And if you are going into this site and using it, the only thing I did was I made them all capital, caps, because I think it's easier to read. And also I was referring back to some Rentry sites I found online for metadata and seeing what other people did and how their sites worked so that I could make my own. And then you're just going to want to, you can have it be lowercase, but you're just going to want to replace the colon here with an equal sign. I don't know why it's a colon because I tried with the colon and it didn't work. So just make it an equal sign. And then you'll put, it's pretty similar to CSS and HTML if you've worked with that before. You'll put like a value px or a word or an image link, that sort of thing. Excuse me. So first things first, we have page title and page icon, which this doesn't really do anything. It's kind of mostly for aesthetic purposes. You can see up here that instead of just saying the name of my site and having the Fluffle logo, I made it say welcome, and it has a little Scooby-Doo icon. So we can just go ahead and say welcome and then get our image link. And this is something that I go through in all of my videos, so if you've heard it before and you know what you're doing, feel free to skip ahead. But it is generally recommended, or I guess frowned upon, not always, but most of the time, to hot link, which is when you copy the image address directly from wherever you found the image from. Rather, it's best practice to save that image to your own device, whatever you're using, and then re-uploading that image on an image hosting site. So I use Card, but it could be anything like Google Drive, Dropbox, those sorts of things, and then copying the image address that way. So I found this little icon from Gift Cities, which is a pretty helpful resource. You can type in any keyword and it'll give you graphics similar to that keyword. As you can see, not all of these are Scooby-Doo, but a lot of them were, and this is where I found a lot of my graphics. And really quickly, I will also mention that in the Google Doc, I have some resources at the top that apparently is AI, including this HTML basics card, which I recommend in almost every video. Super, super helpful if you're not familiar with HTML, as well as some color code sites. One of my personal favorites is Color Hex. I was able to find, obviously, to match my Scooby-Doo theme, someone made a Mystery Machine color palette. So I am using this. Oops, sorry, my email notification just went off. I wonder if that you can hear that in the video. So this is the color code that I am using for container outer background color. So a lot of the metadata is pretty much self-explanatory. In the title, it says what it does. So you are also able to make the background an image. You are just gonna go, you would say container, I forgot what it was called already, container outer background color. So you would scroll down, container outer background color, container outer background image, and then you would simply put an image link in the quotations instead of a color, similar to how we did for page icon. And then similarly, I am using a border, like a image. The border of my container is an image, so I made the inner container transparent, because if I were to make it white, the white would bleed out past the border, and I want it to look like it's like transparent, I guess. So that is why I made it transparent. And then we go ahead, when we get into the HTML and CSS, I made the container white. This will make more sense later on. I know it probably doesn't right now. And then this is how I made my border. So border style solid, and then the border image, which this is one of my all-time favorite resources. You can use any of the images you see here. I'm using the one Biscuit. And so what I did was I just found the image link and I copied it, and then I pasted it into the border image. And then slice and width, I kind of had to play around with it, because in this site it says 7, but when I did 7, it wasn't looking right. So I just kind of played around with the number until it got to where I wanted it to be. And then image repeat round, this was something I just figured out from messing around with the fields on this website. And also you can see that it says 7 fill round, so I knew I needed to incorporate that somewhere. But these 5 lines are pretty much what you're going to use if you want your border to be an image. If not, however, if you want no border, you can simply delete these lines. If you want a rounded border or just a colored border, you would go and find that in this site that I'm referring back to. So you would find border color, and you would just copy that in, replace the colon with a equal sign, and then you would say black, for example. And then border width, you would say 3px, for example, or 1px if you want it thinner. It is, like I said, very similar to CSS and HTML if you've used that before. Okay, sorry, I have a lot of tabs open. You have to switch between them. And then container max width 500px. This is just like standard thing. I saw this in a lot of the entries I used to kind of see how it worked. So I just incorporated that in there. And then content font, we will actually come back to this in a second. Text color, black. Pretty much all my text, actually, I think, yeah. All my text is black, minus my links, which you can see I can set the link color to a color, which I just made it this orange color from the color palette I found online to match my theme. And you can incorporate custom fonts, which we are going to do. This is my resource card with all of my favorite fonts. If you do not find any fonts you like here, I'd recommend going into the resources section and looking under cards. There's a lot of sites similar to this one that I made by other creators with different fonts that they like. So if you're not feeling my font selection, feel free to look there. So I'm using the Nintendo DS font, so I just opened that up and I copied just these four lines, the font face, font family, and then the link to the font, and then the end bracket. So I copied that, and then under edit, you're gonna make style brackets, because this is where all of your CSS is gonna go, and then end style brackets like so. And CSS is basically the style of the site, like the colors and the fonts, that sort of stuff. And then HTML, which we will do underneath the end style bracket, is the actual text itself, the actual images, that sort of thing. So now that we've incorporated the font, we are just going to copy just the name of the font, no semicolons, none of that, and paste it. And this will be the font used throughout this site. So we can go ahead and save it and we can see what we have so far. We just have this, and I will show you guys really quickly if I were to make the inner background color white, which was my instinct at first. You can see that it bleeds out from the edges, which is not what I want. So we're just going to go ahead and make that transparent. So this was pretty much the extent of what I was willing to do with metadata. It did take me a lot of time to figure out, but it is pretty simple once, like I said, once you get the hang of it, once you practice with it, figure it out, it does get a little less daunting. But like I said, once I figured out that I could use HTML and CSS, I kind of switched towards that since I am more confident in that. And so moving on, we are going to go ahead, if I look at my reference, we're going to go ahead and make the inner container. So this is going to be pretty much the entire container, the one that we need white. So I'm just making it background white. And then we don't want the stuff like inside the container right against the edges. So we are going to add some padding. And then we're just going to make sure that it extends all the way to the borders. And then this is optional, but the line height, like the text was too far apart, so I made it closer together. Line spacing, I guess, is another term for it. And then I'm setting, the font I'm using is pretty small standardly, so I made it a little bit bigger. So now we have that, and then we can go ahead and incorporate that. So again, if you're familiar with NeoCities, even Card, this shouldn't be too unfamiliar, but if not, I will say that the HTML and CSS I'm using in this tutorial is nothing too crazy, so please bear with me. I promise the more you do it, the easier it gets. So you can see now we have the inside container. And we are going to go ahead and start with the hello, my name is Lindley, and then some info about me as well as this image. So we want text and an image next to each other. So how we do that is we are going to make a class to apply to the image. We're going to call it right because this image is aligned to the right. And this is a new property for me, something I haven't worked with, but float right is basically just aligned to the right. I did originally just use alignment right, but then it was looking a little wonky on my phone. So float helps a little bit. And then margin left 10px, so it's not right against the text. And then the max width is going to be 45%, and we will elaborate on this further a little bit later when we adjust the site for mobile viewing. And I will actually really quickly put up a picture of how my site looks on mobile. I did have to mess around with this a little bit, but it turned out pretty similar in my opinion to the desktop view. And again, quick reference to this site, I found this image on Pinterest and I just removed the background with remove.bg, which is a site I use all the time and will be linked in the description. And then we are pretty much going to do the same thing with, actually we'll come back to this because this is the image right here. So we're not working on that yet. So we'll come back to that. And then in the Google Doc, if you are interested in making your site compatible with mobile, I have just so you can copy and paste it. You can apply this to pretty much any element. You're just going to want to make sure it's within the medium max width 600px bracket. So you can see I've just copied this div class, and I've pushed it down a little bit and made it smaller so that, because I was having trouble with, we'll go over the text in a minute, but the text was cutting off. It was like the first half of my name and then the second half was on the bottom. So I needed to make this image a little bit smaller, and then I pushed it down so that it still looked centered relative to the text. And now that we have that, we can go ahead and add the image as well as our text. So how we're going to do that, we're going to go into inner, and we are going to say img src, and we are going to add our image like so, and then we are going to add a few things. So first we're going to say class right, because that is the div class that we just created. And then I'm also, okay, I guess you can, where it says margin left right here, you can see this. This was before I originally made a class. You can add that in this. As you can see, okay, it's pretty redundant actually, so we're not going to add that. I just forgot to remove it in the reference. It's doing the same thing. And then the width as well, that's doing the same thing. So we're going to ignore those. I just didn't remove them, but I've already added it in the class. Anyways, not important. So that's pretty much all we need to do to incorporate the image. And if we save it, we can see that the image is there, looking how we want it to. And then we're just going to add text because we already have our font and our color and our size applied. So we're going to say, hello, my name is, and then this resource, glitter text or glitter graphics text generator is what I'll be using. So you can choose any, you can also, you don't have to do this. This is just what I'm doing. You're welcome to maybe add an image or a different font or just regular text. But if you are interested in doing this, you just choose a font style, you type whatever you want it to say, and then it's really helpful. It'll just give you the HTML, which you literally just copy and don't change at all, like so. And then we're going to go ahead and add all of my extra information, and the line breaks are not necessary. I'm just spacing it out so that it's easier for you guys to read. Okay, so I put the font name in I was like, why is the font not showing up? Because I did this and did not realize. So I'll make a note of that when I'm editing, but yeah, just don't do that. And now you can see that it's working. And again, I included this. I was having a lot of trouble when making the reference. So this is just the HTML, like I guess keyword for paragraph. I was trying to do something different earlier, but you can ignore that. It shows up the same without that. So moving on, now that we have that done, we will go on to the links. So we have already set the link color, as you can see, and I do have in the Google Doc, I have a format for how you link things in HTML, which you guys are free to copy and then edit. So you're going to put the actual link here. So like a www dot whatever, the link name. So for example, YouTube. And then I actually need to change this because I ended up not using mark. So I'm going to say star because that's what I used. And then we will go ahead and wrap the links, because I have a lot of links, we're going to wrap them in a class, a div class, and then we are going to create this star, which is the star you see here that is green. So we just have this div class so that the links are aligned into the center and so that they're not, I've added a little bit of spacing between them and the blinkies so they're not too close together. So we will go ahead and do that. We will say dot links, margin bottom, 5px, and then text align center. And then we are going to create a span class, which is different from a div class in the way that a div class is kind of, you would have div classes on top of each other or like within each other, but a span class is kind of more flexible. It kind of flows nicer. It's within like a div class. That probably wasn't explained very well, but basically like a div class would be the entire container of the links, and then the span class, we just need to change this one little thing, the color of the stars. So we're going to say dot star, and then we're going to say color, going back to where we want this green color. And I believe that was all I did. So I am just going to, like I said, I have the example in the Google Doc for you guys to copy and paste now that I fixed it with the star. And again, you don't have to use star. You can use hearts or no symbol or whatever you want. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to make you watch me copy and paste the same or type out the same thing over and over again. But this is, it looks kind of like a lot because I have so many links, but this is what it's going to look like. And I've realized I've typed it wrong in the Google Doc again. So I'm actually literally just going to put this. So we're going to say link here, link name here, and then symbol here. So you will just copy this over and over again for as many links as you have. And then the last thing we're going to do, we did not do this, is wrap it all in the div class we created, div class links and div. And you can see what we have so far, but you can see that the default behavior is the links are not underlined, and when you hover over them, it has this like wavy look, which you are fine to keep that if you want, but I particularly did not like that. So the letter A is the, I guess, keyword for links in HTML. So we're going to say A, we want text decoration underline. And we do not want the hover to be wavy, so we're going to say A : hover color white. Or you can add whatever behavior you want. So once we do that, we can see it's now underlined, and when you hover over them, it turns white. And I guess I didn't mention this really quickly. Target blank basically just makes it so that when you click on the link, it opens in a new window and doesn't reload the page you're currently on. That's just a preference of mine, but you do not have to do that. So next up we have the blinkies. So how I did this was I also wrapped them in a container because they would be in one row on the computer, but then on mobile they would be stacked on top of each other because I was setting a width for them. So we're gonna say dot blinkies, and then I forgot what the code was, so we're looking back. I did look online for some of this because I was confused. This was very trial and error for me, so I promise if it's not making sense to you, it wasn't making sense to me a few hours ago. So display flex, justify content center, gap 6px, and margin bottom 5px. Gap is pretty self-explanatory. It just makes the blinkies not touching each other, and the margin bottom, which we've used previously, so that it is not too close to the element below it. And then justify content center makes it so that the blinkies are in the center. I don't know how else to describe it. And display flex is a display property in CSS that is kind of just how the box is rendered on the screen. I did look this part up, so this is a resource that I refer back to constantly. I just copy codes from here, and even if it doesn't make sense to me, if it works, I use it. So I'll leave a link in the description to this website if you want to go over inline block, flex grid, the different types of displays and what they actually do. But we are using flex for this particular, for the blinkies. So once we have the class created, we can go ahead and create that. And then add our blinkies, which For the sake of time, I am also just going to copy and paste them. You can ignore, again, I didn't fix this, but ignore the width 148 because instead of doing that, because this was not compatible with mobile, we are going to go back to our CSS and we are going to say .blinkies image, which will apply to any image element within the blinkies class. We are going to say max width and set a width to it that is big enough for my laptop, but small enough for it to look in a row on my phone, and that is 30%. But you can play around with this number as you please, depending on your images. And once we have that, we can see that they display as they should. Okay, so off screen, I went ahead and added this part right here because this is pretty similar to what we did at the beginning, and I'm trying not to make this video too long, but I will quickly go over it. So we just added the same, we pretty much copied the format from what we did for the right image, and we just made it float left, and instead of adjusting the left margins, we're adjusting the right margins, and then we just played with the width a bit, and then we went into where we adjust it for mobile view, played around with the width, and added some margins just for spacing on mobile. And then in the HTML, we simply added the image, added the class, and then all of my text. And this website, or this site that I'm working on right now, will be linked in the description. I would recommend you refer back to this one because the one I made for reference is a little less put together. So anyways, moving on. We're going to move on to the final parts down here, which this also is similar to what we did originally. And now we're pretty much just going to be using HTML, no more CSS. So we are going to go ahead and add in an image that I found from the GIF Cities site. I just searched in music, found the little music image, downloaded it, uploaded it to card, copied the image address. I'm adding a width directly to the element, adding some text, and then adding the little image at the end of Scrappy, adding a width, and then at the very bottom, I am adding another image, and I'm adding width 100% this time, and I'm using this format because we want it to span across the entire site. So I am doing, oh my goodness, where did it go? Style equal width 100% versus just applying a number to the width because we want it to span across the entire container. And this will also ensure that it looks the same on different devices. So hopefully that was explained properly. Again, this is similar to what we've been doing previously. And again, I would recommend you guys, you are welcome to use my layout, but I would recommend you play around with it, add your own images, your own text formatting styles, that sort of stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste that down here and we save it. Oh, okay. So I think we actually do need to wrap this text in something. So we're just gonna, like I talked about, this is P for paragraph. So we're just gonna wrap this so that the website knows this is one element separate from this element so that it is not blended together. There we go. And now that we have that, we can see that it is pretty basically the same as my reference, a little bit cleaner. But that's pretty much it for Fluffle. Hopefully this all made sense and hopefully you can get an idea of how the basics, the format, just like the skeleton of how to work your way around the site. And as usual, if you need any help or have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as usual, I will see you all in the next video. Please give me video ideas in the comments. Again, thank you so much. I'd be happy to help if you guys have any concerns. Bye-bye. Really quick editor's note, I did want to wait until the end of the video to say this so that people wouldn't just click off immediately and not put any work in, but I will leave a link in the description to the reference site, and if at any point you are super so stuck or you're like, damn, this girl is explaining things horribly and I'm so confused, you are welcome to edit my site. You won't actually be able to make changes because you are not logged into my account, but you will have access to my code, and technically you could just steal my entire layout and claim it as your own, which please don't do that. But obviously I cannot stop you if you are going to do that, because you can copy and paste my exact code and all the metadata and all of that. But I just wanted to point that out, that if you are really in a tight spot, that is available to you. And also, I just edited the whole video. I'm in a new location, so I had a different setup for filming, so I'm sorry you can hear me shifting around a bit. And also, I use my hands when I talk, and I wear lots of bracelets, so you can kind of hear those jingling in the background. If you were wondering what that was, that is what that was. I just wanted to apologize ahead of time, and hopefully in the next video that will be dialed back a bit.